Welcome to another episode of Luke Reacts. This is with me today, Karys Rhea. Did I say that right?
Karys Rhea. I think you said almost.
Mostly.
Karys. You gave
Karys.
There's a little bit of like an I instead of an A in there. But
all right. I went for it hard. I mess up everybody's name all the time.
But you got the last part right, Rhea, and that was impressive because most people mess that up. There's like an H in there. So
well, I appreciate that. So it's the first time I've ever done an in-studio recording.
Yeah.
And which is actually my house.
Yeah. So, this is totally my idea. I was like, I'm coming to New York. We should do something together.
I was like, no, let's do it on Zoom. You're like, no. And I'm like, okay, I've never done this before. So this is my house. I made this all myself. So I figure I might as well, impress people by my handiwork.
Yes.
At my house.
I'm very impressed by this house and your handiwork.
There's a lot still to come. Anyways, so the world in which we're living in right now, there seems to be a concerted effort to drive a wedge between Christians and Jews, right? You're Jewish, I'm Christian, and here we are. All right, so what's going on? What do you think? Why do you think that is the case?
Right. Well, I think that the global forces of anti-Semitism, of which there are many, understand that Christian Zionism is essentially the last bastion, if you will, of Western philo-Semitism, right? Yeah. The forces that are trying to take Israel down, that are trying to take down the collective Jew, they've already managed to capture the leftists, right? Obviously, the Muslims, right? The 1.4 billion Muslims in the world have systemic anti-Semitism from the top down in many of the Arab Muslim countries. And then what do you have left? You have the Christians as the other, 1.3, 1.4.
No, I'm going with 2. I'm going to say there's 2 million of us, 2 billion of us.
You think there's 2 billion Christians?
Oh yeah. Wow. There's like 1 billion Catholics, and then if you add up all the non-Catholics, it's about 1 billion.
Because I remember, I haven't checked this in like 5 years, but the last time I Googled this, it was like they were both about like 1.4, and everybody was worried because the Muslims were like surpassing the Christians.
In some places, but we're also conversionary, right? So we're all evangelistic,
right?
Same as the Muslims.
Yeah,
they tend to have more kids, but we're holding our own, I think. Right. So we'll see.
Good. Yeah.
But I think, there was I think particularly the Jews in America, and I think a lot of, the framing of a lot of non-Jews, the only Jews they know are Jews in America. And there seemed to be this, they really wanted to get revive the Black-Jewish relationship, to bring about, they remember the good old days of the civil rights movement when Blacks and Jews marched together. There was a big effort to get the LGBT community on board, support Israel. And I think after October 7th, both of those essentially vanished, right? And so it seems, particularly in the United States, that the last target, as you say, is the Christians. And it's because it's really the last major ally group that's has enough collective power to actually push back in any significant way.
Without Christians, the Jews will be effectively isolated, alone once again. And so I think there has been a concerted effort by many forces, including Hamas propagandists, but also supersessionist Christians, and also probably a lot of left-wing billionaire donors, right? To essentially ignite or revive a war between Christians and Jews, create a wedge between them by putting Israel right in the middle and using the language of theology and the Bible and even images, using language and images that depict kind of sacrifice or faith, things like that, and using that as propaganda techniques to get Christians to kind of emotionally tug on the heartstrings of Christians using their own language to question the allegiance that Christians or America has to Israel.
Yeah, I think part of it also is there's a strange alignment that we're seeing and have seen for the last year or so, or 2 years, really since October 7th, where you have kind of the Marxists and Islamists coming together, right? This group, far left.
Right, the Red Green Alliance.
Yeah, the Red Green Alliance. And which is strange to me, because you'd think those two groups wouldn't have anything to do with each other, and yet they are. But it's not surprising to me that they're aligned, because what they're against is the Bible, the people that represent the Bible.
Right.
I mean, there was Karl Marx was asked who is the biggest obstacle for you in the UK in particular, when he was trying to push Marxism upon the world. And the biggest obstacle was Spurgeon, who was a famous Baptist minister who was leading revivals in the UK.
That's what Karl Marx did?
Karl Marx was his greatest opposition.
Wow.
Was a Christian pastor who was leading revivals, particularly among the working class and the poor. Why? Because that was, for Karl Marx, that was the engine of his ideology.
Right.
Right.
Anti-religion. Yeah.
Exactly. And so he saw Spurgeon as this opposition figure, and then the Islamists have obviously a long time been antagonistic towards Christians. I mean, even though they say people of the book and stuff, it doesn't actually resonate in reality. So you have these groups coming together. Their main obstacle is the Bible and the people that the Bible represents or talks about the most, which is obviously in the Hebrew part of the Bible, the Old Testament, is the Jews in Israel, etc. And then the New Testament, it's Christians, but the Christians are building off of the Old Testament. There's a verse in the New Testament that says, the root sustains you, you don't sustain the root. And that is the Apostle Paul talking to Gentiles like me, saying, hey, be careful how you treat Jews and Israel. And so you have this very concerted effort, obviously, that we've seen. I just heard recently, a couple of days ago, we kind of knew this intuitively, but again, like there's this big effort. It's rooted in this anti-Christian, anti-Jewish orientation, but it's really at the root, to me, anti-Bible and anti-people of the Bible. Because who represents the most?
Those two things to me, when you say anti-Christian means anti-Bible, right? Because when I think of Christian, when I think of like Western civilization, and maybe this is a superficial understanding, but the way that I learned about it was like the two pillars of Jerusalem and Rome. Right. So if you are anti-Christian, you are anti, the Roman, decadence and secularism, but you're also anti the traditional biblical values of Judaism and Christianity. And that's why the neo-Marxists and the Islamists find common cause. The Red Green Alliance is not because it did not form because they are united by similar values. It is because it formed because they are united by hatred, by a common enemy, which is us.
Yeah.
But obviously, as you mentioned, if they wwere successful in conquering us, they would be at it with each other. They'd be trying to kill each other. But the enemy of my enemy, your enemy is my friend, all that kind of stuff. So it's a convenient alliance.
But it's also, what's interesting is, I take a lot of groups to Israel, mostly Christians. And the thing that resonates the most when I take groups is it's not the innovation of innovative modern Israel. It's not necessarily like the startup nation argument is helpful and it's cool and all, but it's not enough. It's actually not what sells to the Christian. What sells to the Christian is to walk in the land, walk in the places where, my faith comes to life. That's what resonates. And so to me, there is this, which is, I think, one of the reasons why there was so much struggle to get, the LGBT community aligned or the Black community aligned, or these, because it was not rooted in this kind of historic, deeply rooted values. It was like, oh, look at the, Tel Aviv has a great pride parade, or, Israel invented the cherry tomato. It's great. Okay.
Like, there's lots of Ethiopian Jews.
It's not enough. Right. It doesn't like hit at the core, which is why I think in some ways, I think these forces that are trying to drive the wedge between Christians and Jews are having a hard time, because what they're up against is a much deeper connection. And so where they've had the most success, though, is in instances where Christians have been supposedly under attack by Jews, by the evil settlers, right? And what's often overlooked, well, several things. One is that the Islamists in that same treat the these Christians far worse than anything like the Jews are up to, right? Like
the Christians in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, they flee to Israel, because they are persecuted by the Palestinian Authority, and they have to. All the Christians that you'll hear speak out against Israel in that region, let alone Gaza, they have to toe the party line when it comes to the, calling Israel an occupying, settler, colonialist, evil force. They have to parrot those talking points if they want to feel safe and secure.
Right. And there was several instances over the last couple of months in which, there was there's settler communities that are right next to this village in Judea and Samaria called Taibe. Okay. And there was an incident started the end of June 27th was the start of it, in which news went out to the world that Taibe, the last Christian village in the West Bank, was under attack by settlers. Well, it turned out not to be true. It turned out it was actually the Muslim village next door. They got into a spat with settlers. And it's interesting, even the
videos showed the settlers that were essentially trying to extinguish the fire that the Muslims had ended up setting on there was no church there, but there was the ruins of the Byzantine church, right?
Exactly.
And that's what had been set on fire, and everyone said it was Jewish settlers, but it wasn't.
Right. And so, but what you also have, it's also, so the farm that is right next to Taibe is that the guy who runs that, his farmers, the kids that basically work for him, are all at-risk youth. Okay. So I think that plays into it. So you have this situation where Muslims come out of the Muslim villages, start chucking rocks at these kids. Obviously, these kids are like, what the heck? I'm not taking that. And they start throwing rocks back. And then the Muslims run into the Christian village, and the settlers are chasing them. Right. And so then it sets up this perfect story where settlers are attacking the Christian village. Okay. So that went on basically for about, 2 weeks, that kind of back and forth. A couple of days ago, in the last 4 or 5 days, there was video of Muslims attacking that same village.
Really?
Yeah.
And it goes to show you that I didn't see it, right?
As did most people did not see it. Why? Because there was this pattern. There was a very consistent pattern of a couple of guys on X would post videos, say, oh, this settlers attacking Christians in Taibe. And then Vatican News Service would pick up that story. And because Vatican News is Vatican News, representing 1 billion Catholics, that then gets picked up by every Catholic news wire in the world. Okay. The Muslims attack that same village. There's no article in Vatican News. There's no articles in any of the Catholic news wires.
Mhm.
Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Right.
The narrative is only in one direction. It only it's a narrative that is consistently targeting.
And all you need is a story to exploit for your aims.
Right.
And we all know, even with the report that just came out by those Nigerians that had been tracking the coordinated campaign by Hamas propagandists and their allies to spread lies of genocide and starvation, even before these things were on the public's radar or anything like that was happening. We know that because these forces know that they can't beat Israel militarily, they are heavily engaged, much in the same way that the KGB or the Soviet Union was, or China is, in the information and psychological warfare arena. They spend a tremendous amount of resources, and they give a lot of thought to exactly how they can exploit these such stories and how they can push them out and manipulate them to appeal to certain groups and tug at their heartstrings and get those groups to distance themselves from Jews in Israel.
Yeah, I mean it's very well orchestrated, and it's a very good. It's I'm impressed actually by the level of coordination.
And they do it. Underway. They do it for everything. It's not just Taipei, right? I mean, we know that Hamas spent 15 years turning Gaza into an entire terrorist infrastructure, right? We know that they did not spend any of their aid on building, building schools and hospitals. They let the UN take care of all of that, and they spent all of it to further their existential fight against the Jewish state. Okay, so they deliberately position themselves not just in hospitals and in schools, but they position themselves in the courtyards of the last remaining church in Gaza, right? Or they'll have a base that's set up right next to it. So Israel will have a targeted strike on that base, right. Will damage some assembly hall a little bit, not even that much, right. In a church, and all of a sudden it's and unfortunately some Christians will be killed, maybe 2 or 3 in the process, right? Which is obviously a tragedy. But that is not the story that you hear. What it becomes is Israel targeted a church. Israel targeted Christians. Yep. And you even hear people that you wouldn't expect to be gullible, like Charlie Kirk or Michael Knowles, say things like, Israel's losing me.
Right.
Well, what would you do? What would you do in that case, right? Israel tries very hard to target. They're incredibly precise, and they're largely successful. But this is modern warfare. This is modern urban terrain that they are dealing with a terrorist army that has embedded themselves within the civilian population. What would you do? Right? I mean, it's an impossible situation that Israel's in.
It is, but it's also, I think a lot of Christians in the West, I mean, one of the things that I heard about with this Taipei story was people kept saying, oh, let's just get the Christians and the settlers together. We'll have a press conference and have them talk about, and they'll work it out.
Okay.
But that is like a Western understanding that the Christians are not, that are free to say whatever they want to.
Right.
And they're not.
Right.
And that is the same situation in Gaza. Mm-hmm. Right. So there was the 2 incidences there's 2 big churches in Gaza. One's a Greek Orthodox church that towards the beginning of the war, there was actually a building next to the church grounds. It was not on the church,
right.
And it was being used by Hamas to launch rockets. And so there was a bomb dropped on that building that was next to the church, and the building fell over on the church. That's what happened. Okay, so it fell on the assembly, but it wasn't. The church was not targeted.
This is what I'm saying. The story is always that the church was targeted.
Exactly.
Yet if you look into the details, it's never targeted.
Right. So then the situation that happened in July with the Holy Family Church, which is the Catholic Church in Gaza, that church is in a no-fire zone. It's pretty large. As a result, to your point, Hamas fighters hang out in that zone because they know they're not going to get attacked from Israel, right? And I was talking to a guy recently who told me that there were actual Hamas fighters on the church grounds, and nobody can say anything. And I met with also the head of the Catholic Church in Gaza last week, and I asked him, can we get these Christians out? What can we do to help these? There's 200 Christians left in Gaza, and as Israel is making this.
Where did you meet with him?
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. So he's in Jerusalem. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said to him, can we get these Christians out? And he says, we can't. Like, they have to stay. And it was like we're stuck. If we let them out, if they give special treatment, every church in the Middle East will be a target
of the Muslims.
Yeah.
Because Israel gave special treatment to a church in Gaza. Right. So essentially the entire Christian community in the Middle East will be looked at as like collaborators of the Zionist regime.
Yeah. Right.
Wow. What
a
twisted situation.
They're stuck. And I feel so bad for, the leaders of the church because, these guys, this is not what they want, right? They want their people to be safe. Mm-hmm. And they have to make these terrible decisions based on the fact that the real threat in the region is not the 8 million Jews.
Right.
It's the 300 million Muslims.
But this Catholic leader, he got out. He's safe in Jerusalem.
But there's a lot of Catholics in Israel proper.
Sure.
And
but you said he's the head of the church in Gaza, right?
No, head of the church in the Holy Land.
Oh,
he's the top dog.
Okay, gotcha. And he's stationed in Jerusalem,
right? And there's priests that are with their members.
I see.
In the church itself.
So he wasn't the leader of the specific church. He was leader of the entire Catholic community
in the whole Middle East, not just
in the whole Middle East.
Yeah,
I see.
Right. So he's
right. So if anybody can try to get them out, it's that man, and he says that he can't do anything.
It's just like he's stuck.
Right.
And that's the reality on the ground. So people want the perception of the Christians in the region is that they are free actors in this space, and they're not. Right. The other thing that I think people are unaware of is the fact that not all the people that claim to be Christians are Christian in the way that a lot of people in the West perceive Christians to be. Meaning, in the West, we perceive people who are Christian to be Christian by faith. Okay? You grew up, people can maybe grow up Christian, but a lot of Christians won't consider them Christians. Okay. Christian is a position of faith.
Believers.
Oh, yeah, believers, okay. Right? And because one time I was in Nazareth one time and I getting my hair cut. Mm-hmm. And I asked the guy cutting my hair, "Are you a Christian or a Muslim?" He says, "Well, I'm a Christian." And I said, "Well, what church do you go to?" He says, "Well, I don't go to church. I'm an atheist." That is, for a lot of Christians,
that's bizarre. That's what you hear. That's what you hear when people are talking about Judaism, but not Christianity.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so it's hard for people to understand that Christianity in the Middle East doesn't necessarily mean faith. Same with in Islam and Judaism as well. Judaism or Jews in Israel can be Jews who practice Judaism, can also be Jews that don't.
That's the same case anywhere.
Right. But in the Middle East, it's primarily like all three major religions. It doesn't necessarily mean you follow that faith.
Why is that, do you think, for Christians there?
Well, I think Christians here perceive that, but Christians there are like the other Christian, it's like the Muslims and the Jews. There's an ethnic identity connected to the religious label. Okay, so they're you'll know they are Christian by their last name. You'll know they're Christian
Right.
by their first name.
Right.
You'll know they're Christian by the town they live in or the community they're in. Like, and so it's a ethnic identity in the Middle East.
Right. It's like an ethno-religious
It's a
identity,
and that's the case with all three major religions. Okay.
Completely.
And so what it sets up though is a lot of Christians here do not realize that, for instance, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, is a Marxist terrorist organization. Okay, anti-Israel terrorist organization. That's, you know, it's labeled a terrorist organization by the United States, by the UK, etc. Now, it was started by a Christian, and currently run and currently headed by a Christian. Okay, there's a young woman who was she's been picked up by Israel a few months back, 8 months maybe, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's the head of the Anglican Church worldwide, has been very vocal and, you know, concerned about her safety and her well-being because she was picked up at her university. Well, it turns out that she's basically was the head of PFLP on her campus. Of course, Israel picked her up, right? But as far as he knows, she's a Christian, right? And that's all that matters. And so a lot of Christians perceive it. So they're projecting Western Christian understanding on the region, and that's not the case.
Totally. And they think that because they identify as Christian, that they won't be anti-Western
or participating in actual terrorist activity.
Right. Or, you know, that like Mother Agapia, the nun, the Greek Orthodox nun that Tucker Carlson had on, who had, according to some very, very convincing intel, had worked for the PLO, which was trained by the KGB. Right. I mean,
she was a little nutty.
Or the Lutheran pastor that Tucker had on, Munther Isaac.
Yeah, Munther and I go way back.
Yeah, and he is like a leftist, like Marxist through and through.
Right. Now he firmly embraces Palestinian liberation theology. I mean, all these guys, particularly. So, the way I describe it is there's kind of three types of Christians in the region. Okay, you have the Marxist terrorist PFLP type. Okay. Thank God they're not very big on the Christian side, but nonetheless,
those people you're saying are identify as Christian because they were born Christian, but they're not practicing.
Right.
They're not believers in Christ.
Right.
Okay, so it's strictly just
it's an ethnic identity.
It's strictly an ethnic identity. Okay.
Then there is the nationalist Christians, which is like a Munther Isaac, right? Okay. So he's a pastor of a church. He will.
But isn't he a Marxist?
He might be, but his orientation less. I don't know whether you would call all liberation theology orientations Marxist. Okay. It is a supremacist ideology for sure, but so liberation theology is a theology where you apply some criteria that is the original sin. So, the original sin is Adam and Eve, but before that there was some. So Marxist liberation theology is class. Class is the big sin of the world. It's the big struggle of the world. Okay. There's feminist liberation theology, right? Or womanist, which is that patriarchy is the problem of the world, and you got to go. Come on. There's black liberation theology. Cohn is one of the main proponents of that, and that was like race is the major sin of the world. Okay, so Palestinian liberation theology carries on that theme. Basically, the struggle of Palestine is the sin of the world, right? Like, and so what you have in those, so a guy like Munther Isaac will be a Palestinian liberation theologian. It's straight out of your classic, Ivy League humanities
Right.
department
Social
kind of
justice
rhetoric. So
oriented,
you hear
right.
all about colonialism, like empire, they love to throw around empire, colonialist project, settler colonialist project, the call for liberation. All these things are kind of drivers of, and that group is, they're in a sense, they're nationalist first and Christian second. So the priority of what they talk about on a regular basis is about national identity, and they want to,
of course, the liberation of Palestinians into their own national
ethnic
entity or whatever.
Right. And so then you also have this other group, which is the group that I really the only group of these three that I respect, which is the Christians that are doing just real Christian work, taking care of the widow and the orphan, and helping people, and trying to help disciple their people in their community, trying to just be good Christians. And those people, they kind of stay below the fray on that whole on the Christian side, and they're the ones that are the ones most likely to leave, most likely to emigrate, because they're just like, they're not in it for the national identity piece.
Right.
They're in it because
they're not politicized.
And they also don't agree with terrorism.
Right.
So those three groups are kind of the three main Christian groups in Israel and Judea and Samaria region.
What do you think is the breakdown in terms? I mean, I guess it's very hard to know, but in terms of,
I would say that, on the high side, you're probably looking at 10% of, on that PFLP side, that would be.
And you're just talking about the immediate region, right?
Yeah,
the Gaza, Israel, and Judea and Samaria.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Okay. I would say in the nationalist side, you're probably dealing with probably 30-40%, and the remaining 30% are just.
And do you think that 30-40%, do you think that those nationalists, what do you think that is rooted in? Just their political orientation, or the fact that they are living in fear and therefore they want to take up the mantle of the Palestine cause so that they can be accepted, or what is motivating those people?
I think that,
or is it anti-Semitism?
No, I don't think it's necessarily like anti-Semitism in any like classic sense. It is obviously they're living amongst the Muslims, and trying to survive. And the reality is that Israel views them as Arabs, whereas the Muslims view them as Christians.
Right.
And so they're squeezed.
Totally right. Do you think they view themselves more as Arab? But they view themselves as Arabs.
Yeah,
right?
they'll view them like ethnically they're actually Arabs.
They're Arabs,
like they'll view themselves that way. But like they're just not. They're like 1% of the population in Judea and Samaria.
Right, where they used to be a lot more when Israel was.
Exactly, and then 1%
when Israel had
also in Israel proper. So you're not dealing with like these huge numbers, and so they're just not. They're trying to survive in a region where nobody really cares about them, and then the West doesn't really care about them either. Most Christians are kind of indifferent to Christians in general, like the plight of Christians in general in the Middle East. I mean, heck, when I started doing this work now almost 11 years ago, there was about 500,000 Christians in Iraq. Now today there's about 85,000.
Wow,
that's a big drop. Okay.
Oh, there's
and I have tried everything I can think of to convince Christians to care. And they don't. And so you gotta like I it's frustrating to watch all that's happening with the Christians in Israel and the West Bank, etc., Judea and Samaria. But I also, it's frustrating because I kind of know in a deeper level
Mm.
like where the motivations come from.
Mhm.
You know, it's not all surprising to me.
Mm.
You know, I feel like if I was in their shoes, I probably too would be with them. You know.
Well, the thing that really bothers me though is the fact that while Christians are being persecuted, not just throughout the Middle East, but also in Africa, by jihadists, by Islamists on a regular basis, in the most vicious, horrific ways, involving rapes, beheadings, kidnappings, very similar to October 7th. And this is happening on a regular basis. What horrifies me is the fact that the news outlets that I see regularly publishing this are like Israeli or Jewish news outlets, right? Because they understand we have this mutual enemy of the jihadists. But then you don't hear a lot of Christian influencers, like Michael Knowles, for example, speaking out about the persecution of Christians abroad until it's something that Israel has done.
Right.
And they'll say things like, "You're losing me," and they'll probably say that because they feel like, "Oh, well, I should care more about this because Israel's the recipient of so much aid." But to me, that doesn't fly because they don't talk about Egypt, right?
Right.
And Egypt is the second biggest recipient of Israel, not that much less, over $1 billion a year. And what is happening to the Coptic Christians in Egypt is horrifying.
Yeah.
They are one of the most oppressed group of Christians in the whole world.
Right.
And nobody cares.
No. And I like I said, I have been trying to get Christians to care about this issue for a long, long time, more than a decade.
Yeah.
And I've tried, guilt tripping Christians into caring. I've tried both honey and vinegar. Neither of it works.
So then why do you think, what is the reason that when it comes to Israel, why is it, are they just being taken in by the incredible propaganda campaign? The fact that it's just pushed in front of their face 24/7?
I think that, but I think it's the point in which people care about it is when Jews are involved.
Right.
I think it's because I think that's where you do get some anti-Semitism.
Right.
Because it's irrational hatred. My definition of anti-Semitism is irrational hatred of the Jews, rooted in the fact that the people who brought God's morality into this world, and the world hates them.
Right.
Right. And so it's not rational, because if it was rational, people would care about what happens to the Christians in Nigeria or Copts or in Egypt or Syria. Heck, I mean, look what we're not even
Canada.
Or Canada, right? No, but like a month ago, it was this big attack by jihadis in Syria, right? Again, and there was a video of a pastor and his family who were all murdered. They're murdered in Syria, and it was a blip across this, but the amount of effort, the amount of time that went into the story in Taipei or the Holy Family Church was big news. That was the big news.
Right. Because as we're saying at the beginning, there are an array of forces that are exploiting those stories and making sure that they get pushed out there relentlessly over and over and over and over again.
But I also, though, here's the other frustrating, I'll let you know all my frustrations today.
All our grievances.
is that, years ago, I was talking to my pastor, and I said, I was complaining about the fact that I can't seem to get Christians to care about the persecution of Christians anywhere in the world. And I said, the Jews take care of the Jews, and the Muslims take care of the Muslims. The Christians were like, who cares? And he was like, we just can't let Christianity become tribal. And I was like, yeah, but there's actually a verse in the New Testament where the Apostle Paul says, do good to all men, but first the household of faith.
Yeah, I think that's,
right?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, look, Jews, I mean, I can't relate to that because Jews are a tribe. We are a tribe.
I
So
know.
we are literally inherently tribal. So if you want to preserve, the faith identity of your own people, then you have to look at it that way.
I know you guys do that, and the Muslims do too. The Christians were like, no, not so much. So it's a very frustrating thing for me.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. This fight, and
Yeah.
and the fact, and
you're
and
one of the
all this
earliest
stuff-
names. You're one of the earliest names of Zionist Christians that I had heard of when I started getting into this work back in like 2009.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like it is a, and then all of a sudden, like I could watch the murder of Christians all over the world. Just the slightest, disagreement. Like, Jews. There's some video of like some Orthodox Jews spitting on the ground, right?
Oh yeah.
And then that becomes a national story, right? So the way I describe it sometimes is it's like an abused spouse, who is like, the wife is being beat by her husband on a regular basis, right? And she's got, black eyes. She covered it with makeup, and they're out to dinner, and the waiter is rude to the wife, and everybody's losing their mind. So the fact that the waiter was rude to the wife, all the while, everybody's silent of the fact that this dude's beating his wife every night. That's what we're up against. Right. The Muslims are beating up on the Christians all the time. And then the Jews are like a little bit like,
for sure. But even those videos of Orthodox kids, spitting on Muslims, which is disgusting. Sorry, spitting on Christians, which is disgusting. Those videos don't even show. I'm not justifying it, but they don't even show the full context. Nobody's seeing what led up to that.
Right.
Nobody's seeing that, like the Christians go to a specific area at a holy moment on a holy day of the week for Jews to try to proselytize. They specifically go to try to provoke them at like a specific moment where it's inappropriate.
Right.
And they go there and they start proselytizing in a very, very crude ways.
Yep.
And, the Jews react, in completely inappropriate ways to them.
Yeah.
And it's actually a problem in Israel because, remember, I mean, we're talking about 2 billion Christians, 1.4 billion Muslims, and there's 15 million Jews. And we have endured centuries of forced conversions, and all we want is to be able, we have this like self-preservation instinct, which is why everybody in Israel, even the secular individuals, are having like 3 kids.
Right.
And yet there's this concerted efforts by certain groups of Christians to come into the region. Some of them even dress like rabbis, or they'll dress like Orthodox Jews, and they try to convert the Jews in our homeland to Christianity. Right. And that is a very, like, if you want to like ignite a war between Christians and Jews, that is the way to do it. That's not like a good faith, like, let's get along and try, you know what I mean? That's like a provocative way of, what's it called? Of transmitting, the message of Christ. Right. That's not the way that you do it. Right. So there's a lot of issues with that there. Right. And especially Orthodox Jews are worried because there's some youth that have been taken in. There's some Jewish youth who've been taken in by these Christians that dress like rabbis. Yeah. And then you find out that they're actually Christian. They're not even like Messianic Jews. Like, they're just straight up Christians that came to Israel and put on a costume. And it's become such a problem that there's even a nonprofit in Israel that was started by, you might even know her, started by one of these Christians that used to do that. And she stopped doing that. She recognized the tension and the conflict that it was creating. Yeah. And she instead created a nonprofit. I'm not sure if she still lives in Israel or if she's in the US now, just to raise awareness about it and to try to fight it and to try to bridge that divide.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of those types of issues too.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, it's clearly an issue. Clearly we got to work together to, fight against these people who are trying to drive the wedge one way or another.
Well, that's the thing. That's really the thing, is that we are on the same side.
Yeah.
Christians and Jews are on the same side. Yes, it's true that a lot of Jews in America are liberal. It's true. Okay. Although they're increasingly becoming more conservative. We have 35% vote for Trump. Okay. So yeah. But the thing is that the conservative Jews, both religiously conservative and politically conservative, we are all on the same side here. We are fighting against the same forces. And those political and religiously conservative Jews include Israel, include Israeli Jews. The Israeli Jews, Israel is fighting the enemies of Christians.
Yep.
But instead, what we're being told, what Christians are now being told because of influencers, kooky Tucker Carlson, as Trump would say, and others, they're being told that actually it's the Islamists that the Christians should be joining forces with against the Jews. It's like there's a new red-green alliance that's forming, but it's red for Republicans. It's not red for communists. And they're being told that like you now have, for example, you now have influencers like Andrew Tate, like praising the Taliban for protecting their women, or Tucker Carlson praising Al Qaeda or the Taliban or something because of their drug rehab program, right? Like they're or they're like, let's go to the Gulf countries, and I mean, it's so it's these great conservative traditional values. Yeah, if you're the right kind of Muslim. But if you're the wrong kind of Muslim, or you're a Christian, or you're a Jew, it's absolute hell to live there. And so really what they should be looking to as a model is Israel, not necessarily Tel Aviv with their gay pride parades, but Israel as a whole. Look at the fact that Israel is I think there's a lot of like envy in there too. I want to ask you about this. There might be a lot of like American Christian envy, right? Where it's like they look at the fact that Christianity is declining in America, biblical values, biblically rooted governance, right? National pride, patriotism, it's all declining in America. Wokeness is taking over. And then here's this little tiny country in, a sea of theocratic Muslim nations that despite all of these existential threats, has managed to keep a strong national identity, overwhelmingly patriotic. They have the only increasing birth rate, right, among developing countries. So, like I said, even the secular Jews are having like 3 kids per person. Wokeness has not infiltrated the culture of Israel. That doesn't mean there's not leftists, but they're more like hippie leftists and stuff. The wokeness is like kind of starting a little bit to creep in, but it's not a problem institutionally in Israel. I mean, Israel is, again, strong religious values. The entire country shuts down on Shabbat. I mean, Israel is everything. It's all the things that conservative Americans are trying to conserve, are trying to revive.
Right. No, I think, I just got back again a couple of days ago from Israel with a delegation that is in that